So I've been doing a lot of research lately on consciousness, free will, and there's one philosopher in particular that I've come to have crazy amount of respect for. His name is Daniel Dennett. In relation to consciousness, there's this really important element that's considered in this, and that's free will. In my desire to do research on both topics, I came across a naturalism seminar that was put together. Carroll, one of my favorite physicists, managed to get funded by a billionaire to get together all of the best scientists and philosophers of the day. This was in 2012, and gather them up for 3 days and just have a meeting where all of them are in a room and talk about moving naturalism forward. So really fascinating stuff. It's about 15 to 20 hours long. I watched all of it. And one of the topics that they talked about was free will and consciousness. Each one had their own session. And so a lot of my information I'm getting from there, but it also led me to read more books from Dan Dennett, who was also in that naturalism seminar, which was really interesting. So first off, let's get some of those definitions out of the way. Dualism in metaphysics just simply means that there's a spiritual world and there is a physical world. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, specifically in relation to consciousness. We want to hone in a little bit closer. So in philosophy of mind, dualism is the position that the mind and body are in some categorical way separate from each other, and that mental phenomenon are in some respects non-physical in nature. Who are dualists? Most religious people are dualists. If you think that there's a heaven and a hell, there's a Holy Spirit, there's ghosts, or any of that, not to say that all religious people believe in ghosts, but spirits of some kind, angels, those would all fall in that spiritual realm. And so the question is there some secret sauce in the human brain that makes it different from animals and other beings on Earth, that gives us that spark of consciousness that clearly makes us different than the animals around us? So in the past, most people, most learned philosophers, Rene Descartes, Socrates, all those guys, they basically invented dualism. They said, yes, that consciousness is some really complex thing, and it can only be supported with some kind of supernatural powers or influence to kind of hold it all together and balance. So we know more now, we know a lot more now, and aside from the physics part of it, of looking at atoms bumping into each other, the fermions, the gluons, the protons, the neutrons, all that stuff already tells us from the research we've done on this unequivocally that there is no spiritual realm, or at least there isn't one that is influencing us in any possible way whatsoever. That claim you might not take. And that's fine for you to make that decision. I would recommend you do some research and you find out why scientists at large are so firm on this. That is a separate conversation. We want to look at it more from the philosopher's mind, in the sense that, can we come up with a model, a hypothesis of the human that would explain exactly how our brain works without having to go to the supernatural to explain the phenomenon of our consciousness and what we feel like is free will? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in the past, it was this introspection that the philosophers used to use to kind of think about this. And Daniel Dennett does a really good job of kind of describing why this is just a futile effort going about it that way. If you imagine your computer that you use, or even your iPhone, but mostly your computer. You think you've got a desktop, you got some kind of background, and that's kind of a metaphor for having an actual physical desk of, oh, I have a file and I would like to file it away. I'll get a folder and I'll put the file in the folder and then put that inside my drawer under my desk, and if I need to go get it, I know where to go get it. I labeled it. These are all metaphors for what the computer is actually doing. I don't know if any of you have ever gotten the chance to use DOS before, but I have. It is the most unintuitive way to use a computer in the way that the computer itself is actually working. It's all file structures of, doc slash folder slash blah, 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 blah. And that's still a metaphor for what the computer is actually doing. But it was so backwards. There was no mouse. There's no anything. It's just green letters on a black background. And you had to physically type in exactly what you wanted to do, to move this file to this file. You're gonna copy, you're gonna move it, change the address. It was so backwards, and that's why Windows was so revolutionary, as it gave you a GUI, a graphical user interface, to help us intuitively know how to use a computer, where you have a pointer on the screen that is very much like your fingers to pick up things and put them down somewhere else. And so this is similar to how your brain works when dealing with what your brain is actually doing. Consciousness is an illusion, but I don't mean it in like a derogatory term, as in if you just think about it in the right way, then you can actually look under the hood and start to feel intuitively how your brain is actually working. It doesn't do that. This is a good thing that your brain is an illusion, because it's something that's evolved in our brains to help us understand and perceive the world around us and be able to make these decisions very quickly. And so you think about seeing colors or shapes, that our brains have evolved such that we can just kind of pick out a silhouette and instantly know, is that a person? Is it a dog? Is it a sheep? Is it a mouse? Whatever it is, even through bushes, that's something that we can like discern and make out. And it's because of that special layer that's in our brain to help us kind of take in that information and to make some kind of sense of it. And so basically our brains are just a collection of bags of tricks. And these bag of tricks that we have, we get more from social things that our parents told us, or that other people taught us, or situations that we've been life experiences. DNA is more like the hardware. It's letting us know how fast our processor is, how big it is, what it can do. It's the physical components of the machine, and it does have some software preloaded on there. It's kind of like the BIOS. I don't know if you are too familiar with computers, but it's like the program that's on the motherboard to let you install another operating system like Windows. That's going to be the main system to actually run it all. And so there's some rudimentary things going on there, but really as soon as you boot it up and you put that operating system on it, you're born. Then from that moment on, you're installing apps to help yourself run better, to do things better, and to understand the world better. So that's why, if you're born now, our education system could be better, but comparing it to any other time in human history, it's amazing. By the time you're 18, you know things that, Isaac Newton would have killed somebody for to get that information, and we don't even pay attention to it half the time. There is crucial mental tricks, information that we have gained, passed on. Those ideas are basically evolutionary packets of information. So DNA is the physical information, and then you have actual intelligence of psychology, of information, history, facts, understanding, all those things. What we actually call it, and this is going to seem weird, but the actual original use of this word is for this idea. You have genes, which is the physical way of moving information, passing on from generation to generation. And then Darwin said, for information, it's called memes. That's where memes came from, was memes and genes. They're meant to be similar. And so now memes are a similar idea. I mean, we're using it in the way that it was intended for in terms of the actual literal definition, but most of us associate it with just goofy things on the internet. So we have this metaphor for computers, we have this metaphor for us, that the hardware is our brain, but consciousness is something that emerges when you stick a bunch of these tricks in a bag, and then all of a sudden we put an overlay of it of that thought process, that internal dialogue. Some programs, just like on your computer, are just running in the background all the time and you don't know. Those are like the automated things of how to walk, how to not bump into walls, how to see, how to focus. Like, we all focus our eyeballs. We don't understand how it happens. I mean, if you're a biologist, you do, where muscles are actually pinching and contracting in such a way to moosh your eyes so that they're the right focal length to get that light to bend and hit your eye in one spot instead of spreading it over the sensor all the way. Anyway, the point is that we know how to do those things automatically. Those are background running apps. But who you're gonna vote for and why and what's your favorite song, like all those things are kind of generated from the memes and the second system of thought. Second system, I should explain what that is. There is a book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Forget the author, I'll put it up on the screen. And it's a really fascinating book, and it's widely accepted by scientists and philosophers all alike. The research has pointed to this is just how our brains work. You have system one, which is your automated system. It's those apps running in the background. And sometimes you get those from your DNA, sometimes it's just your natural way that your brain works. You'll tend to do things that way. If I throw a ball at you, do you duck or do you try to catch it? Like, those are things that are just kind of baked into you, either through your experiences or through your DNA and a mix of both. Then you have system two, which is you. That's when you're saying words in your own head and you have an internal dialogue, that's system two. System two is slow and kind of lazy, but it's highly accurate if it's doing a job, if it gets off its butt and does it. So I'll give you an example. If you're driving a car for the very first time, you're gonna be super concentrated on using the gear, doing the pedals, looking and following the rules. You're super duper focused on that. That task is being done by system two, you. You can't have a deep conversation with somebody in the car when you're first learning how to drive. It's just not possible. It's too much for you. It's overwhelming. But over time, you keep practicing, and eventually those tasks, those little mental tools that we have, get moved over. They're built by system two and then moved over to system one. Kind of like how a computer has to download a program and then it's now on the hard drive and you can just run the program whenever you want. That downloading process is you thinking really hard about something and practicing to do it. So once it's over in system one, you don't think about it. It's all automated. You all drive cars and it's easy. It's so easy to drive a car, have a deep conversation, put on your makeup or sing to your favorite song, whatever it is, and still drive the car like 90% as good as if you were super intensely concentrated on it. So, keeping that in mind, our brains are chemical reactions that can be predicted. Because if we knew the location of all atoms, their trajectories, all that stuff, that we could play it forward. And you could be thinking, how, this is so ridiculous. We just talked about ideas and how they flit in your mind and they flit out, and I'm deciding what's true or not true, and this just doesn't seem plausible that it would be a part of this giant computer that could predict the future. And as odd as it sounds, if you knew everything, if you knew it all, and literally ideas are imprinted and are located in our neurons, which are made out of atoms, as well as in the minds of other people, as well as printed in symbols to represent something on books, on the internet, in audiobooks. Those ideas are there. The physical thing isn't an idea, it's just a record of that idea. And then you have to have a conscious brain assimilate that information, decide to believe it or not. But that can still all be a physical thing that's happening and can be predicted if you know literally all of it. And it's the science on the molecular level that lets us know those things. So, like I said, I don't want to focus too much on that part. I want to talk about the ramifications of that. Because there are three kind of outlooks on this. We talked about dualism There's actually two other kind of points of view that you could adopt instead of dualism. One is compatibilism. Compatibilism basically means that, yes, there is a deterministic future, and in that regard, you don't have free will, but whatever it is that we choose to do in our lives from moment to moment, when we're presented with many options, that act of using our brain, our bags of tricks, to do those things does have ramifications for other people and other things, and we need to be held accountable for that for society to run. If you kind of ignore that part, you tend to be more of just a raw nihilist where, oh, nothing matters, it's all planned out, it doesn't matter what I'm gonna do, and then you actually change your behaviors because of that. It was predicted, but regardless, in the moment, that is gonna have a negative impact on you and others around you. So we want to continue a little bit further, the compatibilist says, and say, well, we can have something that resembles free will and that keeps society intact, keeps our sanity intact, and we could proceed. Then there's the incompatibilist that says, yes, there is a determined future, and therefore there is no free will at all or any kind of free will. It really is all just going to play forward in exactly the way that it's all going to be predicted, determined. So I'm a compatibilist. I do believe that the math and the science behind particle physics is pretty rock solid. And in fact, we are in a world that is determined. Yet, I agree with Daniel Dennett that it's a lot more subtle than that, in the sense that there is something like free will. In the meeting of the Naturalists, they discussed free will, and the first thing they decided they need to do is change the phrase. If naturalists are going to communicate clearly exactly what their viewpoint on determinism and free will and consciousness, they need to get their definitions down, use the right words, so that they can clearly express their ideas. So first thing they decided is that the term free will is not one conducive to what they think reality actually is. After a lot of discussion, they settled on volition, the word volition, which they all liked, but there was still a missing element, and it was Daniel Dennett that kind of identified exactly what that missing element was, and it has to do with morality. So this is the official replacement from the naturalist point of view of the phrase free will. It would be moral competent volition. So that sounds like just 3 random words that you made in Boggle. Let me explain it. So moral competence. What is moral competence? If you have a job, if you have a car or a license, chances are you are morally competent enough to sign a contract, go get a loan, make decisions that have ramifications. For those people, it's not everybody, but for those people that are morally competent, we hold their actions accountable to them. So if you rob a bank and you get caught, we're putting you in jail. You couldn't claim on the stand, well, I'm an incompatibilist. This was all planned out from the beginning. It's not me. I didn't choose to do this. The universe chose to do this. Nah, that's not gonna fly. It's true, but that doesn't mean you weren't at fault. You had to have those decisions process out to get to where you ended up being. So for society to run correctly, we're gonna hold people accountable. That person does not have access to this mythical computer that can actually take all the information where all the atoms are and have infinite processing power to do that. He doesn't have access to that information, so he cannot use that as a get out of jail free card. So as long as you're morally competent, you have volition. You could decide to do things, or as one of the naturalists put it, instead of free will, it's free don't. that you have the freedom to not respond to your carnal nature, that pre-programmed side of you. Some things are involuntary, some things are not, and that's the control that you have. It's not so much what to decide to do, but what to decide not to do. But I think most of them agreed, and I agree with them, that the best phrase is moral, competent volition. And just a quick note on people that aren't morally competent, you know, it's like kids or, you know, mentally disabled people. They don't have the faculties to make decisions, to be able to say no to their carnal nature. So we're not going to hold them accountable in the same way that we would somebody that's morally competent. So now let's talk a little bit about evolution. How did our brains evolve to be such powerful hardware for these bags of tricks that we have, these memes that we're taking in? And there's a lot of things that trace back to two things. Competition is the most common thing in natural selection and evolution. Competition is it's like an arms race of whoever's the strongest, the fittest, survival of the fittest, will dominate. But once you get to a certain intelligence level where maybe physically you're not the best animal, but you have the ability to communicate and coordinate with other similar species, then it becomes an extra layer of successful competition, and that's cooperation. And so humans, once we started to develop language and we could cooperate with each other, that gave us collectively way more power to do things that other animals can't do in the same way. Some animals fight or hunt in packs. That's something that happens, obviously, and that's part of why those animals are still alive today and haven't gone extinct, is that's a successful model in many cases. But not to the same level that humans could do it. We're so clever in being able to have an idea, come up with an idea, and then pass that information on, that meme, that mental trick of, if we dig a hole and we put leaves over it and then chase a mammoth into the hole and he falls in the hole, then we can stab it really easy. And so even though no, 1, 2, or 3 people could just man fight a mammoth, we're able to coordinate and do something really extraordinary for basically just smart animals. And so it's a constant balance for us. You could probably think in your mind at work or in your family, there's this constant balance between cooperation and competitiveness. Those two things are always fluctuating depending on what the situation is calling for. And sometimes the right thing is to be competitive, sometimes the right thing is to be cooperative, depends on the atmosphere and the job or the situation that you find yourself in. But it's no coincidence that these two things are a part of our reality. It's something that helps hone living organisms in a world that evolution is king. So our ability to cooperate and communicate clearly, people that could have good ideas all of a sudden became much more likely to survive and pass on their genes. And also not just be smart, but also get the whole group to work together with their idea. It was like both. The idea of hey, this clever thing I can do, that's maybe coming from the competitive side of us, but then to get us all to work together, that's the cooperation. So I think you take those two things, and it's like iron sharpens iron. Over time, we get smarter and smarter and smarter because we're taking these two things hand in hand. And I think most animals fall into one or the other. Sometimes they work together, or it's just, if we have enough babies, sure, a lot of us will die. We just have so many leftovers that it's okay. There's different successful models, but for humans, this is the one that in the last 10,000 years, we've become the dominant force. If you just weighed all of the animals on land, the terrestrial animals, we were not even 1% 10,000 years ago. Now we're 98%, if you count our cattle, which we were also counting before. That's phenomenal for us to bloom up that much, and that's how we did it. And then when we take this one step further with evolution, and we have certain mental tricks that we do, that when somebody does something, they smile, they frown, we instantly have a reaction to that. They're happy, they're mad. Is it because of me? Are they happy to see me? Are they waving to the guy behind me, or whatever it is? We naturally want to figure out what is going on. Sometimes we can't help but do these things. Try to not be affected by somebody smiling or frowning at you the next time that somebody smiles or frowns at you. You can't do it. You can't do it. You're gonna have a default emotional reaction to one of those two things. And the reason for that is natural selection, that we need to assess the situation and make a decision on what to do. Are you a friend? Are we gonna cooperate? Are you an enemy? Are we gonna be competitive? Do I need to fight you? And so these things are emotional. These chemical reactions are very strong and very compelling for us to respond to it in certain ways. And so some of these mental tricks that we can teach ourselves is to be able to disregard that in a society where most of the time, if you go into a random retail store, you're not just gonna get beaten up by the employees that work there. There's social norms, there's social laws, there's morality, there's more ethics, that there's some of these parts of our instinctual nature that we don't need anymore. So we have to be aware of how our brains work. This is why it's worth finding out how consciousness arises, how free will works, and all that stuff. There are very real benefits to this. Give you another example. Everybody is really confused with this whole notion of fake news in the last year. Fake news is perplexing on both ends, because what people are claiming is, hey, this thing that everybody thought was a part of reality that we could all agree on, no, it was a lie, it didn't actually happen. Well, that completely changes how we're gonna react to that. So now we need to do research. Is that thing really real or fake? And you won't let us know if it's real or fake? Or are you fake? Is that actually a real thing and you're just saying it's fake news to sow doubt into the idea that we're all dealing with the same reality? And it becomes very confusing for us, because we need to be able to coordinate together. And there's competition in the world, if you're looking at nations and stuff, that this is a really, really dangerous problem, and one that is going to stop our progression as a society if we can't agree on what is real and what is truthful and being straightforward and honest. There is a very real downside to neglecting that and to sowing doubt into people. If you understand these mental tricks, you have power to manipulate people, or for the good and for the bad. And I think that this whole fake news thing is an example of the negative side of that they know it works. Because if you sow a little bit of doubt, then it's more ambiguous and you're less convicted on what we as a people should do ethically. So that's just one example of how important this really is. So what's the point of this? I think there is two things that I would like you to do. Not because I want you to, but because I think you should want to. Number one, you should do some research and see if you believe that you're a dualist, a compatibilist, or an incompatibilist. The dualist, you believe that there's two realms of reality. There's the spiritual world and there's the physical world. And sometimes they talk to each other, sometimes they don't. And that both has ramifications for religions, but also for consciousness. You have to decide, is that somehow affecting you and how you think? I'm curious to know. Tell me, are you a dualist? If you're not a dualist, and you think that in fact, as the scientists say, everything is determined given physics and being able to play it forward, that either one, we do have some kind of form of what I like to call, and what Daniel Dennett likes to call, moral competent volition, and you're a compatibilist, Or are you an incompatibilist and you take a hard line to it and say, no, if it's deterministic, then in fact we don't have any kind of free will. It's all just a joke, and purpose and meaning is ambiguous at best. There is kind of a hidden fourth one, which Daniel Dennett likes to call the Myrrh Keys, and I agree with him, where you just decide that this decision or this topic is too difficult to ever come to any kind of conclusion on, both free will, consciousness, if there is a spirit world or not, that they embrace the mysticism behind it and the romantic idea of not ever being able to know. You'll hear people say things like that of, we can never know if there is a God. We can never know if there is a predetermined future. We can never know how consciousness really works. There's no way that you could never know. That's absurd. That's completely illogical, and you should not be telling yourself that. If that's what you're telling yourself, it's just a lie. However, there are people that embrace this idea. They are smitten by this idea of, we can never know. Maybe there is a God, maybe there isn't a God, maybe we have free will, maybe we don't. Maybe I believe in prophecies that basically say things are determined, but I still hold on to the whole romantic spiritual side of it. How does that make sense? Is the spirit world affecting us? Is there a God that's in the world orchestrating things or not? Because if he's orchestrating things, making a prophecy, that's actually, it's all been determined. Or is he making a prophecy that he's going to only affect that one thing, but it's not all mapped out? That's a little ambiguous. Anyway, so those are the murkies. They're the ones that don't even want to try because they like the idea of not being able to figure these things out. So, dualism, compatibilist, incompatibilist, and then we're going to call them murkies, people that just like mystery and suspense. These are all the guys that think the world is still flat and we didn't land on the moon and 9/11 was all set up. I don't know. Whether or not that stuff is true or not, it's just being taken in by the mystery of it is the thing that I find interesting. I'm interested in truth, but I'm also interested in things that are actually verifiable, observable, and objective. Most conspiracy theories don't fall into those things. Hey guys, what's up? I just want to explain some of the videos that are down in the description. I've got stuff from Carroll. He's a physicist and cosmologist. He does debates as well, kind of in his spare time. Really interesting guy. He's got a really good God is not a good theory talk that he gives, about an hour long. I'll put that in the description. I think it's worth checking out. I'll also put the link to the playlist of all the naturalism, moving naturalism forward seminar that these 12 scientists and philosophers all got together for. I'm also gonna link a video below with Daniel Dennett and a small panel of people to discuss consciousness, free will, AI is kind of snuck in there a little bit. It's really interesting. It was done very recently. It was in 2017, I believe. So check that out. It's about an hour and a half. Again, I watched it. It was worth every minute of it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If these things are being watched, if you're interested in this stuff. I want feedback to know if anybody's getting sparked to figure this stuff out as much as I am. I'm interested. All right, bye.